What's going on, Dolphins? It is your boy Dillon, and today is the day that I make my video taking a look at the Dolphins roster, looking at possible free agents and some of the top draft prospects regarding offensive line. So today I'm going to take a look at the offensive line. I've already done a few installments of this where I've evaluated the roster, potential free agents and draft picks that could end up, in a Dolphins uniform. I did it for the secondary already on Monday, so check out that video. That was corners and safeties. Tuesday was linebackers, and yesterday was defensive line, so defensive ends and defensive tackles. Today it is offensive line, so first we are going to start with the players that we currently have on our offensive line. And so let's see, we start here with Evan Boehm. He's one of those guys that he's been in the league 4 years. He's 26. He's a bit of a veteran. He's okay. He's not in my opinion, he's not spectacular, but he's all right. He's certainly a solid veteran at this point to have on your offensive line. I like him more as a backup personally, because he is a solid player, but I don't necessarily want him to be, a starter. Let's see. We have center guard Evan Brown. He's 23, been in the league 2 years. I don't really know too much about him. He's okay from the limited, stuff that I have on him. But, he's another one of those young guys that, hopefully can develop. I've heard some good things about him. And so, we'll see if he can develop into something. Because obviously, the offensive line is the absolute weakest position group we have across the entire team. So hopefully he can develop into something. Then we have guard Shaq Calhoun. He was a rookie. He's 23 years of age. And so with him, right, Shaq Calhoun, remember, he was one of the rookies that Pat Flaherty didn't want to insert into the lineup because he didn't feel like he was ready. That and Michael Dieter, who we'll talk about in a minute. But Shaq Calhoun ended up being, not that the bar was very high, but he ended up being one of your better offensive linemen. And then throughout the season, randomly, he was just put on the inactives list. If you guys, have been watching my channel for a while, that how I feel about that, and I feel like that was one of the many things, the laundry list of things that proves that the coaching staff was, intentionally trying to put the team in, a bad position to be successful and to win this season, so that way they could position themselves going into this next draft. And from, my perspective and from, the data that I have, it seems, and my guess is that they are going to take, that war chest of draft capital and move up in the draft to get a quarterback. We'll have to wait and see how that plays out, but that's how it seems to me. Then we have tackle Julian Davenport. He's been in the league for 3 years. He's 25. He's very up and down, very rocky. Last season, the 2018 season, he was one of the most penalized tackles in the league. He wasn't quite so bad this year in that regard, but his play isn't very inspiring. And so, he's still a young guy, so, hopefully he can develop into something. Obviously, I expect he's going to be in camp. We'll see if he makes the team. That'll be an interesting, the entire offensive line is going to be really interesting. My guess, though, is that it's probably going to be almost all new faces on the offensive line, maybe with the exception of like 1 or 2 guys, one of which is going to be the guy that I'm going to talk about next, which is Jesse Davis. He's been in the league for 3 years. He's a guard tackle. I think he's terrible at tackle. To put it simply, he's not the worst I've ever seen. Not that I'm an expert or what have you, but he needs to play at guard. And right guard, I think he played, in 2018, he played really well at right guard. And I just think that I like him. I like him as a player. I just think that he needs to be at right guard. I don't think right tackle. They need to find another right tackle. Obviously, he's going to be on the team. Michael Dieter's next. He's obviously going to be on the team. Well, I mean, I guess they could get rid of him if they felt he was bad enough. But he was a draft pick. He was the 3rd round draft pick of the Dolphins in 2019. Part of that very, very underwhelming draft class. Let's also note, because he's not currently on the roster anymore in any capacity, but he was also a draft pick of the Dolphins in the 2019 draft class on the offensive line. And that's tackle Isaiah Prince, who ended up getting cut by the Dolphins after being, on and off the lineup and on the active roster, etc., got cut and then claimed by the Bengals. So he's not even on the team anymore, which, regardless of how he develops as a player, that is, negative points against the Dolphins 2019 draft class. And in fact, if he actually turned out to be a good player, it would be even worse because they lost him. But that obviously, one way or the other, remains to be seen. But Michael Dieter, on the other hand, though, he was the other player, right, that Pat Flaherty got fired over because he wouldn't put into the starting lineup. And then to juxtapose that to Shaq Calhoun, right, Pat Flaherty got fired because he wouldn't put those 2 rookies in because he didn't think they were ready. Then Dave DeGuglielmo comes in, and obviously Pat Flaherty got fired because Brian Flores didn't want that, right? He wanted, the way I see it is he wanted to put this team in a position to be as bad as possible, so that way they could lose as many games as possible and position themselves as best they could, etc. And so he did it. And then part of the evidence for that is that, again, Shaq Calhoun actually played rather well overall. Again, not that the bar was very high and was one of your better offensive linemen, but you just randomly decided to put him on the inactives list. He wasn't on the injury report. There were no disciplinary issues that were public or would warrant something like that. But then Michael Dieter was almost never taken out, and he was garbage. He played like hot fucking garbage the entire season. He let up a bunch of sacks, a bunch of hurries. He was just not good. But, we'll see how that goes going forward. Let's see. Then we have... Who else do we have? We have center Daniel Kilgore. So he's another guy. I mean, all the reports, he's 32. He's been in the league for 9 years. So he is getting older. He has had some injury issues as he's gotten older, but he is a solid player. And I liked him when, he was brought in under Adam Gase to help, as a temporary fix to that line. But that was when it was going to be a temporary fix and not like this, a staple of your entire offensive line. No offense to him, but, again, I mean, he's another guy that, especially at this point with his age and his injuries that are starting to pile up, I would rather him be a backup, right? I would rather have him as our backup center behind Garrett Bradbury, who they could have gotten in the 2019 draft had they done things very different. And then they could have had, left tackle Laramie Tunsil and right tackle Juwan James, and you'd be good with, let's say Jesse Davis at right guard, etc., etc. Now, they do expect that he's going to be back with the team next year, and he's likely at this point going to be the starting center, which to me is a tragedy. And I mean, again, I don't know. I mean, we'll have to wait and see how it plans out, but I don't think that it's, it doesn't seem to me like if that ends up being the case, I mean, I think it's going to be another rough season for, that offensive line. And I mean, unless he ends up being like your weak link, right? If he's the worst offensive lineman you have that's starting, then that's one thing. But I don't foresee that to be the case. I mean, we'll have to see how they handle free agency in the draft. Next, we have Adam Pankey, who's 25, been in the league for 2 years. He's just a young player, don't really know much about him. Obviously, we would expect him to be around, but he, he's got some upside. He's got potential. He's a young player. We'll have to wait and see if he can develop, but he's another one of those young guys that can hopefully develop into something and help this offensive line elevate themselves beyond just garbage. Because unfortunately, they're garbage right now. So then we have center guard Keaton Sutherland, yet another guy. I mean, we pulled him. I can't remember whose practice squad or whatever we pulled him off of, but we pulled him somewhere. I mean, he's 6'5", 316. He's a big dude. He's 22 years old. He was a rookie this year, so he's a young guy as well, and so there's of course a lot of time for him to develop and realize whatever potential he might have. He spent the entire back end of the season when he did get to the Dolphins on the inactives list, so we'll have to wait and see. But again, another young guy that can hopefully develop into something to help out this offensive line. Then you have Jamarcus Webb, who I think personally is just garbage. I think both Julian Davenport and Jamarcus Webb are garbage, but at least Julian Davenport's younger, and by that alone has more upside. He's because Jamarcus Webb is 31, has 7 years in the league. He just didn't play very well. I just thought he was a mess, personally. Let's see. Then we have on reserves. We have for reserves and futures contracts. We have Chidi Okeke. He's a rookie, 23. He's a tackle. Again, don't really know much about him, but they did sign him to a reserves contract, so they're going to obviously have him around for camp. And again, that offensive line just needs tons of help. So any of these young guys, hopefully they, out of all of, because the vast majority of their player evaluation to this point has been lackluster, to be as nice about it as I possibly can. And, we just hope that, because again, part of this whole year was being able to find some young guys that can, be brought up and developed to be a core part of your team going forward. And unfortunately, we just we didn't come away from this year with really much of that. So it's kind of a disappointing year in that regard. We hope that some of these young guys, especially on the offensive line, because it's just a tragedy. It's just a tragedy. Anyway, on injured reserve, we have Danny Isidora. He's a guard in the league, 3 years. He's 25. I can't remember where we got him to. We picked up, there's so many new guys, so many young guys, so many new faces picked up from all over the place. It's hard to keep up with it, but he's definitely got some upside and potential. From the little bit I've seen, I do like him as a potential guard prospect, maybe as the left guard, because that's probably where we're going to need it the most. It depends on how they end up structuring this line, but that's where I would think, and he could be a good player to fit in there. Let's see, and that's it for the players that are currently on the roster. So let's take a quick look at some of the potential free agents that are out there right now. So let's see. Let's start with left tackle. We will look at some of the tackles that are going to be potential free agents coming up. We have Andrew Whitworth from the Rams. He's got an $11 million price tag on him. We have Anthony Costanzo, Kelvin Beachum. There's some pretty big names, but those guys at the top, they're obviously going to command some money. Dakota Dozier, he's interesting, and Cedric Ogbuehi, DJ Humphries. All these guys are pretty cheap. Chris Clark. So there's some potential, definitely some potential young talent there in free agency. I just see and they said that they're going to be big spenders in free agency, and then my expectation is that they're going to trade up and give away. They're going to break the bank to, because then Chris Greer's making comments about how he feels like, it doesn't matter where, right? They're going to be super aggressive, and if they want to get that number one pick, they'll get that number one pick, which doesn't play well to me, because it means to me that, and especially with what I know of Stephen Ross, my guess is that, they're convincing me more and more as time goes on that there's actually a likelihood that they're going to trade up to the number one spot to get Joe Burrow, because he's that shiny toy. He won the Heisman Trophy, he set SEC records, and he could be a wonderful thing in the NFL, but I fear that they're going to do that, and then they're going to like break the bank also cap wise, right? So they're going to break the bank draft capital wise to move up to the number 1 spot or whatever, or wherever they move up to, and then they'll break the bank cap wise by going out and thinking that they're going to patch together the offensive line with, you know, even like an Anthony Costanzo or a Kelvin Beachum, right? You know, or an Andrew Whitworth, right? I mean, Andrew Whitworth is the most expensive left tackle there, $11 million, when they could have had a young left tackle, a generational tackle in Tunsil if they just would have kept him, you know. But Whitworth is 38, Costanzo's 32, Beachum is 30, right? The youngest tackle on here is DJ Humphries. Now that would be a decent one, right? He only had a cap hit of $2 million in 2019. Now he's likely to get a bit of a pay raise, but if they could get DJ Humphries on, you know, I don't know, 5 or 6 million a year kind of thing, then that would be reasonable. But I feel like they're gonna like way overpay, or like, you know, if they paid him what like Andrew Whitworth is getting paid, I think that's like, anyway, we'll have to wait and see. You know, there's still time, and free agency is fast approaching, so, you know, we'll see. As far as right tackles go, I mean, there's a bunch of them, and there's some big names for sure. I mean, the most expensive is Brian Bulaga from Green Bay, but he's 31, but you know, 6.7 million. But that's as expensive as it goes, so it's not actually too bad. So, you know, right tackle might be a position where they could look at in free agency. You can't overpay, and I just feel like that's what they're gonna do. But Marcus Gilbert's out there, Jack Conklin, let's see, Jermaine Ifedi, Donald Penn, Dennis Kelly, let's see, Marshall Newhouse, Patrick Omame, or whatever. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You know, and then there's some, and, you know, those last guys, I mean, Marshall Newhouse, TJ Clemmings, a lot of these guys, you know, once you get to the back end, aren't going to be that expensive, and, you know, have some higher upside. Plus, you know, also too, those last few are, you know, generally are a bit younger as well. So, you know, there's that. Okay, so let's look at guard. Let's see, because guard's definitely, I mean, again, we need to rebuild the entire line. Let's see, Ron Leary, he's 31. He's the most expensive one on the list with a $9 million cap hit. And then it's $5 million for Brandon Scherf, who is also, but there's some interesting potential here. I mean, none of them are really that expensive. You know, Brandon Scherf, Eric Flowers, Andres Pete, Mike Iupati, Quentin Spain. There's some names out there that they could definitely, I mean, I like Ted Larson. He's out there for cheap. But, you know, he's also old too, and has had some injury history, and we definitely need to get younger. So we need to get young, cheap, up and coming talent. I mean, but that's the thing is it's up to the personnel department to make good evaluations, right? That the ideal situation is that your personnel department combs through all the young, cheap talent out there and identifies which ones are going to break out and become, you know, amazing things for your team, right? And wonderful players in this league, above average, maybe Pro Bowlers, etc., but, you know, that are cheap, that are not getting paid a lot, maybe because they, you know, are on teams that had guys ahead of them, etc., or whatever the case may be, and then, you know, pay them a contract that to them, you know, seems big, but is very reasonable for the team and for the cap overall. You know, my guess is that they're going to go out and they're going to, you know, break banks, and I think it's going to end up being a disaster. But again, we'll have to see. So let's take a look at some centers that are out there. Ryan Khalil definitely heads that group up with an 8.4 million cap charge in 2019. You know, he's a great player. I again, you know, I wouldn't. We need to me, again, the premier positions are left tackle, right tackle, and center. So I would definitely pay those positions more than guard. But at the end of the day, you know, I mean, like Ryan Khalil, he's 35, and I don't want to overpay, and I want to make sure that we get younger as well. Spencer Long's out there. Let's see, Hronis Grasu is you know, pretty good. He had a, you know, $720,000 cap hit last season. So, you know, a lot of these guys are really, I mean, there's not many other really big names out there free agent wise. And I mean, look, ideally in the draft is where you want to build your team, right? And so there's a lot, we have tons of picks, but then if you handicap yourself by then, you know, trading away a bunch of those picks, then you kind of force yourself to have to pick up the slack in free agency, and then that leads to overspending, etc., etc., etc. So, I don't know. Again, we have to wait and see what they do. It'll be interesting for sure. All right, so let's real quick, let's take a look at the draft, and let's look at the top 10 offensive linemen, since it obviously includes 5 different positions. So the top 10, the first one overall on CBS, again, because that's where I'm using, is the 8th play they have is Jedrick Wills, and he's their 8th overall player on their big board, is the 8th player overall, but their number 1 offensive lineman. He's from Alabama. You know, and so to me, again, you know, like for my, if I was doing it, I wouldn't make any trades unless I was trading back. I would do that. I would not trade up, especially to chase one guy or a quarterback. You guys know how I feel. And I would take an offensive lineman with the first pick, with our first round pick, so number 5 overall. So, you know, and depending on who it is, maybe it's, you know, Jedrick Wills or Andrew Thomas or Tristan Wirfs, you know, one of those guys. You know, I mean, unless Chase Young was there at number 5, you know, I would take an offensive lineman and shore up that offensive line and get somebody that you think, you know, is going to be a young guy that's a staple of your offensive line going forward. And then, you know, that helps whoever you put at quarterback, no matter who it is. I mean, they expect that Ryan Fitzpatrick will be back. They still have Josh Rosen and Jake Ruddock, and they're expected to draft a quarterback high, blah, blah, blah. Whoever you put back there is good. You know, their play and their film, their success, all of that is going to be determined in large part by the offensive line in front of them. So I absolutely would invest, you know, that first pick in an offensive lineman, definitely over a quarterback. But anyway, so yeah, like I said, Jedrick Wills, Andrew Thomas, Tristan Wirfs, Tyler Biadasz. I'm sorry. Again, I'm terrible. If I mess up these names, I apologize to those people, even though they'll probably never watch my show. Mekhi Becton, Austin Jackson, Prince Tega Wanogo, Isaiah Wilson, Josh Jones, and then Lloyd Cushenberry round out the top 10 for offensive linemen. So, overall, I mean, I think, again, if it was me, I would certainly take an offensive lineman with that first overall pick, and I would pick up, you know, with the 10 plus picks that we expect to have, I would pick up a few linemen. I'd take one in the first round. I would take, you know, like one in the third round, and then like one in the late rounds, right? And then I would try and find some of the young talent out there in free agency that isn't going to demand some kind of major price tag, and then try and bring them in as well to compete, and just have a bunch of offensive linemen to compete in training camp of young, you know, young talent, young cheap talent to hopefully then find, you know, a workable 5 for this next season, and then a group that can potentially grow together for the next several years and become something dominant. Yeah, so, and of course, as you guys know, I am not a fan of big spending in free agency, so I don't want them to break the draft capital bank by trading away, you know, a good portion of all of this accrued capital that we have, and then, you know, go chase a quarterback just to overspend in free agency and think that that's going to be the, you know, the cure-all for your offensive line woes, and then your quarterback get demolished, etc., 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 etc. So, we'll see. You know, first we have to wait and see what they do, and then second we have to wait and see how it plays out. So with that, I'm gonna get up out of here. I hope you guys enjoy my videos and my perspective. If you do, make sure you hit the subscribe button, make sure you hit the like button, make sure you hit the bell if you want to get the alerts. Share my channel and videos with your friends and family. Leave your questions, comments, and concerns down in the comment section. And of course, as always, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Dillon Tartaro. And with that, I am out. I'll see y'all soon. Fins up.